Hello and welcome everybody to the Most Important Conversations. I'm here with my colleague, Jenna Smith, and you know that Jenna and I are doing this podcast on a regular basis now because what we've discovered is that relationships are a core part to our happiness, to our thriving, and fundamentally, it's probably what drives and motivates most people to do the other things that they do. So welcome. And Jenna, I want to turn it right over to you. Let's just get right into it. What's hot and what's on your mind right now in the world of relationships to ourselves or relationships to others?
Yeah. So I was noticing in conversations with people about the concept of open relationship and also cohabitating with your partner, with you're taking care of your kids, you're staying in the house, economic reasons or whatnot, but noticing a theme of the women being the initiator of an open relationship concept and also seeing the men not being a big fan. And you would think, oh, okay, they think that's really enticing or interesting. But my sense has been there's a lot of hurt. And then there's a lot of reactivity in this open relationship, ethical non-monogamy, ENM, if people don't know that term. They are embracing it because it's what it is. It's like, it's to stay in the marriage. This is what we're doing. But they don't seem very happy about it.
Interesting.
It's what
that is interesting because it certainly goes against the sort of tropes that we have about men. Right. And there's so many different things we could talk about there. First thing that comes to my mind is studies that were done for years. They've been replicated over and over and over again that men who are married and or in and that's a whole other thing. We can talk about marriage in a second, but men who are married or in a long-term committed relationship tend to live longer than men who don't. Okay, so then I'm like, why is that? What is it about men? And it's not true for women, incidentally. In a non-monogamous relationship or are single, they tend to flourish and thrive. So it leads me to wonder, what is it about the male, the masculine, that needs this relationship to be committed and consistent, and how that's connected to health? Obviously, there's an emotional aspect to that. And then where did we get this idea that men just want to do whatever the heck they want with whoever they want?
I don't think they do. Just from what I am seeing, I really don't think they do. So I just saw Elizabeth Gilbert talk about this, and there's studies about women making more money, being healthier outside. And it's not we're not having an anti-marriage conversation, because I highly believe in committed, growing intimacy, relationship, and all of that kind of stuff. But it's just interesting. On the flip side, women pour themselves into the men as a form of conditioning. It's sort of a nature, like a natural tendency to want people to succeed that women have, to want them to be nurtured, to want them to be elevated. And then they're kind of emptied out. And then the man's thriving because of this energy exchange. That wasn't my theory. That was put out there on this podcast that I saw. And I thought that was really interesting, though, because I do see that. I work with female clients, 40, 50, 60, 70, that are like, I just gave everything to this person. And then they're to the point of resentment and bitterness because they thought if they kept giving, they would somehow start receiving. And that dynamic doesn't necessarily always happen. So I added a lot in there in that conversation, but to say there's a lot of amplification happening at the side of the woman that allows the man to feel more fulfilled and successful and their needs met. And then the woman is kind of sometimes depleted and not having that same receiving.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here, just to really scale it back a bit, is a sort of a nature nurture thing in a way. Because if we look at the institution of marriage, and it is an institution, okay? You go back, anyone can go study. There's been a lot written about it in the last 20 years. Anthropologically, you can go back. There's lots you can reference and look at where marriage originated. It originated at the advent of agricultural societies where property became a thing. When we were, as humans, when we were living in more commune, collective-based societies, where there was shared ownership. There was no sort of individual property. We had a different dynamic going on than what happened as soon as the agrarian societies started to segment property. And one of the things that occurred was women became seen as property, became seen as beholden to a single individual. And that was, obviously a natural evolution. So I don't think there was a committee that sat around and was like, okay, how are we going to move from this to the new thing?
And in many cases, it was a protection from baser instinct people going around willy-nilly, but there was a sense of protection. And I think men having ownership, healthy ownership of like devotion and caring and how can I help you and how can I serve? I think that's a strong inclination for a healthy men, healthy desire to serve. But then there's the protection from the other ones. I think that was very real. I think that was needed.
Well, what's interesting about this, though, is so here there's a whole bunch of research that has started to come out over the last several years about when women were actually in positions of power in matriarchal societies where they were the ones who were sort of calling the shots versus a patriarchal society. I was just on the phone this morning with a friend of mine in Bali. We were kind of having this conversation, but not the same topic, but we were talking about leadership, and we were talking about sort of masculine leadership versus feminine leadership. And she made an interesting point. She said, if you look at the family dynamic, whether it's a nuclear family or a communal family as historically existed, has always been this intuitive, instinctive sense that you need both a masculine and a feminine perspective on whatever's going to happen. And so she was like, the idea that we elect a single leader in a government and usually it's historically been a man for the purposes of our experience, and that's starting to change. But she's like, actually, I think we need both. Like we should elect a masculine leader and a feminine leader, and they should both have to work together to get a total well-rounded picture. Now, I don't want to go down that path.
No.
Where I was going with that, though, is she says, look at the family, a father and a mother. Okay, so we know that there's benefits to masculine ways of being and feminine ways of being. When we look at marriage, coming back to what we were talking about here, something got construed where the masculine, the male, became sort of the dominant, the female became the property. And coming back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, it seems interesting to me that under that circumstance, the male could guarantee that he would always have a life partner. So when we were talking about men need women, this became institutionalized in a thing called marriage. Women didn't really get the opportunity to say, but I don't need that. So how can we come up with a different structure? And I think coming back to what you brought up today, maybe we're starting to talk about that. Maybe the institution of marriage, which is a microcosm of this sort of masculine leadership model that has existed across all sectors of society, maybe that's starting to be challenged, not only in politics and business, but even in the nature of relationships itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And being revealed in that, but it's so messy. And so our point of us doing this is because it's so messy. It's, well, now what? And who am I? And, in this kind of open relationship world that I've been exploring, who is that person now within the family unit and just feeling really ungrounded and really, trying to seek satisfaction, trying to seek connection in reactive, lopsided ways in a way, right? Because it's like not quite coming from here, but it's still there. And so this is so complex for people to navigate. And we're here to talk about it, that this is happening. Not a lot of people are talking about it. I'm only finding out because I'm doing this type of dating style, like finding out about reality under the hood and behind the curtains that isn't being talked about. So the structure of marriage, the structure of our society with the economy, that they can't move out and have their separate little,
there we go.
Like they don't have that option. So they're still stuck with this system. There's just a lot going on for people, real deal, post-divorce. Our marriage is kind of, we're not in love anymore. We're not on each other's side anymore. Because I did want to say this, the healthy masculine, whether it's male or female, right? So we're gender inclusive here, that healthy masculine in that setting, if they were the lead, not the controller, if they were the lead, then the submissive, biblically, the woman should submit to the man. So that's been taken to the extreme, should be a healthy, I want the best for you. I want you to have the best for you. I want the best for our family. So that essentially could be a wonderful situation for everybody where everyone's feeling really fulfilled. But it doesn't happen that way, where there's control and there's this and there's the woman having to submit, but like you make the person happy. And that's what's breaking down. You need to be like this for me to be happy. So now people are just trying to break free and find joy and find love, because that's control. That's systemic programming. That's not relating.
In your experience, working with, the patients that you work with, and also just your own personal journey as you're starting to kind of unpack and step into this world. So a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, Jordan Peterson became very famous for talking about the incel, right? These men who are involuntarily celibate. Mm-hmm. In other words, they're only celibate because they can't find a partner. Can't get any. No one wants to have sex with them, right? So his answer, which I totally disagree with, was, well, we need to get back to traditional religious values where the man is the head of the household and women don't have the liberty to be able to say no. To the point you brought up about sort of the biblical model of be submissive.
Yes.
Right? So I totally think he's like, we can't look to the past for what we need to create in the future. It just doesn't have any answers. It might have some guidelines and some things that we can learn from, but it doesn't hold the model for where we're headed, right?
So how would that fix the incel thing? Like, okay, the woman doesn't want you, so marry her?
It does. Well, essentially what he's saying is, what you need to realize is that you ought to be happy in a marriage to just one person and know your place and know your role. And
if you're not dating around and be a whore. Got it.
Yeah. What you just ought to be happy with this. So it's very, he's very myopic and masculine, power structure focused. And I think it's his own stuff, his own programming that's coming out clearly. So,
and I want to add that I've been in a monogamous relationship that was beautiful and wonderful, and we were best friends and wanted the best for each other, and both of our lives were enhanced because of it.
Yeah.
But from here's what you want, here's what I want, from a lifestyle perspective, from a life trajectory perspective, the concessions were too big. And so when you love somebody enough, you can go, okay, we're going to break under that pressure of me needing to do this and you need to do that to be together. So we separated. But I know the beauty of a beautiful monogamous balanced partnership. So I just want to add that, like, it isn't just this, but until then, I'm not going to settle for a partnership or like, oh yeah, you'll do. Come move in
exactly.
With me
right. Well, that's
make my life harder.
That's their answer, the Peterson world's answer to solving this problem. The question I have for you though, is this: is the rise of this incel phenomenon, and I'm not even sure it's a phenomenon. I had never heard of it. I had never experienced. I had never knew anyone who was going through that. Maybe they just didn't talk to me about it. Maybe it's generational. Maybe it's not our generation. It's a younger thing.
I think
but my question,
so
here's my question to you though, right? My question is this happening because women are stepping out, standing in their power, saying, you know what, I'm no longer willing to play this game. I actually I have my own life. I have my own dreams. I have my own hopes. I have my own potential that I want to live in. And that doesn't preclude me being in a relationship, just like you were saying, but it also doesn't necessitate that I be in one.
I believe that wholeheartedly. And I believe the toxic version is societal conditioning of like, I want, that song, trust fund, blue eyes, 6 foot. So now the toxic version, like call it that, of these young girls only wanting the jocks and only wanting the this and only wanting what's on TV. Or I think that's added to it too, where these guys they might have just been shut down too much and then bullied by the things. And so there's this whole systemic issue too around not valuing as a society the values within somebody. So then these people like gotten so angry and so not valued and so not seen. And then it just keeps getting worse and their self-esteem keeps plummeting.
Exactly.
That now they want to react and make someone else hurt if they're the ones who are acting out. So we were in Toronto, like I lived in Canada, you're in Canada, but Toronto had that white van plow.
Yeah. A couple years ago.
Downtown. Incel base, like just rage. I hurt, therefore you need to hurt. I mean, that's the explosive consequence of this dynamic. So the toxic version of women so extreme about the type of guy they should be with and their egos. I think young women is another element. We'll add to that. We're like, I don't want to date you. You're a loser. You're like, because the values are just one thing. And I would say that's one element. But the other one being not needing to be chosen has been really empowering for me. When you're young, when the guy likes you, you go out with him. The sense of I get to choose this wasn't really there. If they ask you out, you kind of go out with them. If you're kind of okay with it, like, right. Do, or yeah, sure. Or I'm like, that desire to be liked and wanted will start most relationships, not choice, not who am I? What do I need? What are we compatible with? Then they'll try to make it work and sit down and like sports. And I give 0 F's about sports. I don't care. Go watch sports and I'm going to go do this. Like, but that option wasn't there.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to go to the hockey game.
Yeah. You went and you liked it, whether you liked it or not. You liked it.
You just tolerate and then adapt in that way. And so the ability to start seeing options and models of choice and what works for me and what's compatible for me. Because to me, with the dating, it's not about not being rejected. It's about finding who you can be yourself with, not this, I need to be this or that. So anyway, I went off on thing, but I do think choice, women typically feel like, and I hear this with my clients all the time, post-divorce, he picked me. And when it was great, but it wasn't actually a match. They weren't actually compatible.
Right.
As partners, because those questions weren't being had. It was just attraction and we're 3 months in. I guess we should move in. I guess you're my person. Oh, let's have babies. Let's do the family thing. And not that like that's everybody's life, but that's it for a lot of people.
It's a lot of people's lives. Well, you bring up a really powerful point that comes full circle to the incel, to marriage, the need to be in something that's bound and codified. You talk about choice, and here's the challenge with choice. And I agree with you, but choice based on what? And so, so most people don't know themselves.
No.
And so the choice they're going to make is based on what? It's not knowing yourself. It's based on something else, which then leads you into a thing that eventually you end up tolerating, right? So,
that's the options. Now you're in options. Yeah. Well, these are the 3 single guys in my area. So I'll choose Bob. Like that typically is how it'll go.
Or the checklist on like the dating sites, in terms of the qualities and stuff like that. But if you think about how are people making that choice to check that box, if they haven't done the work to know themselves, the incels are lashing out and reacting. It's not, they're approaching it from a victim place. I'm being victimized because no one will sleep with me. But the reality is, no, you don't know yourself. And because you don't know yourself, you're not connected to your power and you're blaming other people for it. And so this is, I think, the bigger issue. I think what we have done kind of well over the last, say, 30 years as a society is we realized that women were so disempowered that we started to create the conditions to transform that.
Right. It did go a little too far, and there's a little too much everything that polarizes, right? It can go too far. Even in therapy, someone learns to set boundaries and suddenly everything's a boundary.
Everything's a boundary.
That's how we have to, even little kids, right? You got to just push it to find your way back to center. We're in that right now. Just a little too girl power spoken as a empowered woman. Like it's too girl power because it's imbalanced. Don't have girl power be, I don't need you, men suck. I don't like that at all. I don't think men suck. I think that's not good for little girls to see. I wanted to add to the incel thing, porn culture. So if that's where they're learning things from, that's also part of the problem of why can't be working, because that's not how it goes, right? Of lack of modeling of being a confident man, being a secure man, how to talk to women, how to navigate, that's also not there. There's a lot of other stuff that is not helpful.
Well, I just want to highlight too, again, what we tend to do is we make the thing outside of ourselves wrong. And that's because we don't understand ourselves. So it can't be us. So it's got to be that, right? One of the things I always, when I work with leaders on, is I teach them that the brain, all of our brains are simulation making machines. That's what our imagination is. And the brain doesn't know the difference between a simulation and the real thing, which is why you can go into, airline pilots can go into simulators and have the same physiological effects of vomiting, sweaty palms, heart racing, etc. And they drove to the simulation, walked into a building. They know they're not in the air, but the brain doesn't know that subconsciously, right? That's the same mechanism that's happening when people are watching porn or when people are watching violent movies. The brain is, as far as the brain's concerned, this is happening. And so effectively, we condition our subconscious to think, well, this is how this goes. And it's very subtle and under the surface, and before you know it, you're trying to relate to the real world the way that you've conditioned yourself in the simulation.
With video games and
whatever and all of that.
There. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with those things. But if you're not connecting if you're not actually connecting with people and learning from people, I would say that's the other thing with dating in open relationship style. I've learned so much more about myself and men and just staying curious and staying at choice that has been only possible through experiencing it, but because I have the base of self-relationship.
Right. That's the core.
That's what's different of Jenna in her 20s being like, why didn't he text me? What does it mean? Like that used to be the mind noise, but now I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks for showing me who you are. Or maybe he's busy. Like it doesn't reflect on my worth.
You sent me this, I don't know if it's a screenshot or something of an app that was like how to text men. I mean, we're going that granular. Let's bring it back to where you started though, because I'm really curious about this. So you're engaging with women, you're engaging with men, you're having these conversations, and what you're finding is that it's more often the woman who is, and we're not saying this is absolutely the case. It's
maybe
just
not more often, but who I've been meeting. Yeah. Like then the woman initiated the open relationship, but then, there's been a lot of heartbreak about it of the man just adapting to that. And what are you going to do? Like, I mean, no, we're going to stay. Like, I mean, I don't know what their options would be in terms of breaking up. So yeah, the women initiating it, the men going along with it. And it just kind of, I don't know how that's going to work for everybody, to be honest.
Well, actually, I think it can work perfectly fine if the men do the work on understanding themselves and developing their own sense of power and security, and it not being related to another person.
Yes, that would be the solution. And I think that's the amount of men I see doing therapy, because men mostly only do therapy. Again, generalizing. We're going to generalize a lot because it just happens a lot. So men being pushed to do therapy because the conditions are so uncomfortable and they can't function. Then they'll go to therapy. Then they'll feel better. Then they'll leave therapy. What you and I talk about is permanent transformation.
That's right.
Which is not fair weathered. It's not, I feel better. I can do my job. I can go to sleep. I can get to the end of the week. Transformation in the form of who do I need to be in this relationship without losing myself, without feeling those rejection? How do I feel these feelings of rejection to a point of completion? So I'm not sitting and seething, and every argument or every dig becomes that flare up of 10 other files of emotional debris that haven't been processed. Like if that was all the case, that could totally work. That could work. Because then I actually love it with the kids being in the same house. Like I think that's actually, could be a really healthy thing. Like, hey, we're here together and the kids are in the same house. You don't have to go back and forth. There's something to be said for anything, but go ahead.
No, that's interesting. So I wanted to ask you if you felt that, okay, how do I phrase the question? Is it the case, do you feel, for women that this is their sort of natural state outside of the conditioning? And so women who aren't kind of tapped into that, well, I would feel more connected to myself, more powerful, more whatever, if I were in an open marriage versus, what about the women who think, oh, I'm not like that? I mean, do you think?
I was like that. In my relationship in my 20s, I remember him saying he was smart, philosophical, open thinking guy. And I was like raised Catholic in a small town. So I couldn't see beyond my conditioning at that time. But I remember him saying, I believe you can love more than one person at a time. And I was like, absolutely not. Like it's me or nobody because of worth issues.
Right.
And now that I don't, my worth isn't contingent on whether I'm wanted by somebody else anymore. that creates a whole other landscape of possibility for relationship. But I think in the current marriage landscape, the women, there's something missing that their partner isn't empowering in their own life. And then they go and look and find that somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that yearning, I think, in some cases. It's not always healthy. Sometimes it's just reactive. I'm not getting it here. And it could be so many different things motivating that I think women would like to feel a certain way that they might not be getting in their marriage. And so they seek that, whether they might cheat or whether they're like, wait, I want to open a relationship because I'm not getting it here. So I think that's more what's happening is like, this is missing for me. I want to get it from this person over here because I'm not going to get it from this person over here. But I think the really healthy version of that is to be able to know themselves enough to go, oh, I need more emotional connection. I need sex to be done this way and not this way. So instead of having any kind of conversations with anybody, they're just going and getting it from, well, this guy does this. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I still don't think it's very conscious. I think it's still a little bit, I'm not getting it from here. Oh, I can get it from over here. I think that's still going to not necessarily be fulfilling at the end of the day. But the ability in its heightened form would be, what do I really need to feel connected? And the ability to communicate that to people.
Yeah.
And then the freedom, for me, it's all about freedom. The freedom of like, you know what, if you're not capable of that in the most authentic way, loving way, I can actually get that from over here, from this authentic person of who they actually are being in the world. I think that's really cool. Don't know how it all works out because I'm in the beginning stages. But in its highest form, you don't have to be different and you don't have to be different.
Yeah.
Everyone's good. But this need isn't getting that.
Well, let me add this, and I don't know what we do about this, but based on my work, I can't help because I'm always interested in going to source. And I know we typically as human beings like to talk about the topics, and topics are fun.
The problem is the problem.
But topics are like the leaves on a tree.
Yeah.
There's so many topics. There's only one trunk and one root system, right? So let's get to source. That's why I called my Substack Source Code, because I'm interested in getting to the source of what it means to be human. And so when I think about everything you were just saying, women, and these are, we're going to generalize. Yep. So women tend to skew and lean more right brain. Okay. Yeah. So we've got, this is where our emotional center is, our creativity, that sort of fluidity, right? So women's behavior, and for all the men and women watching, the sort of mind-changing behavior is an example of the innate fluidity of women. They're going with how they feel in the moment. It's like in the morning, they might feel one way, let's do this today. By the time evening comes, I don't want to do that anymore, right? And so that can drive men. Right. That could drive men crazy because men tend to skew left, right? It's more like logic,
testosterone, the
linear.
Actual hormones are just through the day, where women is, woo,
Totally. And men sort of drive at a target. It's like, this is what we're doing. Let's go after it. Hence the business world and the political world that we find, because men created the world we currently have in terms of the systems and structures that define it. Okay. How does this relate to what you're saying? If men are target focused, linear, logical, it will make sense to them to have a partner, boom, that I focus on, that I build an infrastructure around, that I can count on, predict. I don't have to second guess whether she'll be there tomorrow. That, now I want to just qualify this. Some women are more left brain dominant. Some men might be more right brain. So there's always exceptions to this, but generally speaking, right? Yeah. And then women, on the other hand, it's that fluidity. So it makes sense to me that women would be more open to open relationships, because from their perspective, there's no single person that can give me anything and everything that I want, because that changes throughout the day and the week and the month. And rather than expect you, person that I'm with, primary relationship or however you want to call it, to be 10 different men, I'm just going to say, you be you. And I'm happy to be here, I don't know, 75% of the time, but 25% of the time, I need something else. So the question then is how to balance this. I believe if the man or the masculine person can do the work on themselves to know themselves, locate their source of power inside themselves, that dynamic wouldn't be a problem because they know they can still count on what they've created as an infrastructure. They can still count on that relationship, 75, 80%, whatever the percentages of the time. And they're not going to be triggered knowing that the right brain leaning person, the woman, will be more fluid. So this is just something that hit me.
Self-trust. Yeah. Self-trust we talked about last time. So the ability to have that self-trust and that other self-trust and that other person. So the thing is the partnership has to be baseline compatible,
right,
to begin with, to have that integrity is within yourself, to need to communicate to the person, hey, you know how we said this 3 months ago and we committed to this thing? Here's what's happening for me. The transparency, the confidence, the inner confidence, to not fear you're going to lose the person, to have that risky, courageous conversation with that person, say, here's what's happening for me. That's going to build the trust, internal and external, within the relationship. Because think about relationships, you can't control them. You can't control the person. The desire to is very strong, you know?
Yeah.
And so when we look at trust and openness and freedom and like, let's trust this base that we've decided on, we've committed to, and continue to communicate, that should feel good. And if that feels insecure, you can communicate that. Do I see that in the world a lot? Not a lot. I see really great relationships, but that do that. The most part, they don't say the things. They don't say the things because they're afraid the person will see it a certain way or react a certain way that isn't true. It isn't authentic of what they're trying to communicate. So anyway, there's that with that dynamic. I think it can be. I think that's where I'm headed in terms of, hey, if I'm going to be on tour and you're going to be over here, my problem with finding a reliable, not reliable, but like reliable meaning like this can work. I can still do me and we can do this, has been based on, but we're together and we're at our house and you work your job and then I do this and we're together. The idea of me going off and following my career, following my dreams, following all that kind of stuff has been very confronting in the dating world of men just being like, I don't, that feels scary to have you off and about. And then when I thought, okay, open relationships, cool, I can have both. There's inevitably somebody else who wants that level of strong, communicative, yet free, like a base, like an anchor, like a partnership, a companion, but not catering to the old school marriage system of things, something co-created. So the way I'm doing relationship is co-created. Let's have a conversation. What are you looking for? What works for you? By your 40, 50, 60, you should be a professional you. Like at some point, you should have figured out who you are to know whether that will work for you or not. And then be honest. Instead of trying to make the relationship work, actually be honest and say, you know, that doesn't work for me. But that goes back to our source work, to my resourcing method, to your source code, to the ontological, like to come back to who we are as creators, as human beings. Is the biggest gift we can give ourselves in relationship, which is why we're having these conversations.
So here's an interesting idea. We talked today about the incels, the involuntarily celibate. And there's a trend that I've been noticing in sort of the Hollywood culture, pop culture world right now. Choosing celibacy is a thing that's starting to happen and people are becoming quite vocal about it. So it's like we could play with the word incel. Instead of it being involuntarily celibate, it's intentionally celibate. You know, there's a shift, right?
Yeah.
And so some famous people who've decided this is what they're doing, at least for right now, include 50 Cent, Drew Barrymore. The most dramatic one that I heard of recently, and I had no idea, is Lenny Kravitz, who apparently, according to him, hasn't had sex in 9 years. 9 years. And I'm like, And see, I don't know about that. I want to talk a little bit about that because I'm like, I think there's some dysfunction happening here. 9 years, 6 months, a year, some period of time.
Get your energy clear. Yeah.
Get your energy clear so you can know yourself, so that then you can choose. Coming back to your whole choice thing, right? You can't choose if you don't know who you are, because all that's happening is you're in reaction to something if you're not coming from a place of intention of who you are being. So the intentionally celibate, that's my definition of the new incel.
Yes.
I think it's a better reframe. Might not be a bad thing, because I think that, especially for men, I think we can get totally clouded and confused because of the power of sex. right? It's very powerful. And so I think men can get like, oh, what do I do? And I think that might be some of what you're experiencing with your clients, your patients, the male ones who are, it's got such a power, the oxytocin, the pair bonding, all of the stuff that goes on through
but that's
that
an
process.
addiction response. And so you want to sober up and yes.
That's right. So the intentionally celibate might be smart and very insightful for the people who are choosing it. Maybe they're like, I'm in addiction to this person or to dating or to whatever. I need to just be me for a while.
Yeah.
But what about Lenny Kravitz? 9 years? Like what? Let's think about this.
I like that I didn't look this up. Chad's like, hey, let's talk about this on Wednesday. And I had just done 4 talks and saying, and I was like, I don't know. But now that you're telling me, I'm like, wow, what I could see.
He says it's a spiritual thing.
I was going to say, so spirit and artist, what I can see as a creator. So that same sexual energy is creative energy. So I'm an artist, you're an artist. I don't feel as sexually charged when I'm really creative. So that's true. That energy is going somewhere. I think the spiritual thing, I think there's so much power in partnered sex and solo sex. And, some of my friends call it goddess celibate. Like, as they're intentional, like, I'm celibate, but I'm not celibate. Like, they're like, they're like, they have it figured out on their own. But I think in his case, he's obviously not doing self sex either. He's just, bringing, so in spiritual tradition, so we're both spiritual. You can meditate, you can bring that energy up into your higher energy center so that energy is being used at that level.
Sure.
That's cool. I think we're here to be humans, though.
Yeah.
Is more how I feel about that.
Yeah. It feels a little like instead of punk rock, it's monk rock. Like, I think what's going on with him, I don't know. I'm not trying to judge the guy. I actually love Lenny Kravitz, his music.
I love him too. I was just like fascinating, just sexually charismatic. It's such a great example of like, what's this about and what do we think about it? And it's his life and he's doing him. What do we think about this as a topic?
Yeah. Yeah. But just generally speaking, I think the intentionally celibate movement, which I think is a much more empowering thing, the involuntarily celibate, it's like, and that's what I think
explains their whole movement of victim chat rooms and everyone's masturbating to their ideas like that.
That's what that is. And it's, to me, it's no surprise, I'm not a people get this as they listen to this. I'm not a Jordan Peterson fan. I think this guy is actually creating,
even in how you say his name, Jordan Peterson. Like,
I am not a fan. I think for someone who's a clinical psychologist to be so toxic and negative in terms of their solutions, that basically he's saying to women, it's like, there's this old saying that deceit and evil and lies are best delivered in the shell of truth. And so there's an aspect of what he's saying, and we can maybe have a whole separate conversation about some of Jordan's views, because it's not inconsequential. I mean, the guy has millions of people following him and thinking he saved their life. And the truth part of what he was sharing with them probably was helpful, but then it's the Trojan horse effect of, and we need to go back to, these biblical values. He's become this ultra religious person, and I'm not against religion. If that's your thing, just don't push it on anyone else. Right.
Yes, exactly.
So, but anyway, so I think that the incel movement, and he really was the champion of that, has done a lot of destruction. I think the reframe that popular culture seems to be doing with the intentionally celibate, I don't know, they don't call themselves that. I'm just playing with it. But I think this could be a really powerful thing for people, to actually say, I just need to hit the pause button.
And I think they should, because I think that like dating, who are you dating? I mean, the amount of, hey, have you met anybody? Actually, they stopped asking me, but like, have you met anybody? Have you, It's so, the movies, the love songs, I'm a singer. So like, here's my heartbreak songs and here's my, ooh, I love you songs. So part of this, that to say, I'm just going to bring that energy in for me right now. I'm not going to be pulled by hormones and attachments until I know, what do I want to attach myself to?
Yeah.
And I think that's healthy. That's super duper healthy and generative. Do I think we're here to be humans and have experiences, including to be a spiritually meditative, let me just always have this energy in my head? That's a choice. But I also do think there's so much to be said of the experiential sensory realm.
I
as a
totally
spiritual
agree.
being.
There's a fabulous book, I don't know if you've read it, called The Spell of the Sensuous. And it's been around, I don't know, 12, 15 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a deep read. Okay. So the writer, I'm trying to remember his name, he's a phenomenologist, and he's basically arguing that we've become so in our head that we've lost our connectivity to the experiential reality we are in, and that there's a certain magic and wisdom that we can tap into, but we've just become, we're all up here. It's like there's no body anymore.
And fulfillment, like the fulfillment of the senses of being a human mammal meets being. I 100% agree. And then the whole, like, I mean, my whole job is getting people from mind dominance to resources, their body, their heart, and their spirit. What makes you feel alive, and actually shifting those gears so that those resources are online again. Because mind dominance creates anxiety, depression, conditional relationships, imposter syndrome, which is just shame with good PR is what I call that. That's the mind field of mind dominance. Whereas sensuous, like, how does the beach feel? How does the sand feel? Presence. It brings you into the present moment. Yep.
Yeah. I was recently in Bali for a couple months, and I was reading this book actually while I was there. It was perfect because actually the opening chapter, I had no idea. The whole opening chapter is his first trip to Bali. I was like, oh, that's kind of serendipitous.
I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, the experience phenomenologically, the senses, how they were so awakened, and how in Bali, and this is true, they're very not in their head. They're so in their body as a people. And, so they do body work, and there's sorcerers, and like they still magic and shamans. And they don't have a medical system, for example, the way you and I think of it in terms of Western medical. To get that, you got to go to Singapore. They have sorcerers. You literally go into the jungle and they do what they do. Reading this, it was just a profound experience. And when I was there, it was like I was so connected to that sensual world, right? The smells, the sights, the sounds, the touch, all of this. And then I came back to North America. I'll never forget the feeling. It felt so orderly, so sanitized. And I don't mean this in a good way, clean.
Yeah.
Like it was boxy. Like I found myself, I'll tell one quick story just to give you an example. So we had a driver the whole time we were there, and, we could have driven like most people do in Bali. They're on bikes and, little scooters and stuff like that. I didn't want to do that. It looked fun, but the first thing I noticed is that because of the jungle, the canopy of trees boxed in a lot of the exhaust and the fumes. And so if you're on the bike, you're literally just breathing this stuff in for hours at a time. And I was like, I don't want that. So we would drive around, and that wasn't the kind of sensual experience I was looking for.
No.
Right? So I'm sitting in the car, and the driver, so they only have it, I was in Ubud, and they only have like a couple lights in the whole town. On the side that there's about 500,000 people that live there. And on the side of the town we were on, there was one light. You have all of these cars funneling into an intersection. And this particular intersection had no lights. So you're trying to figure out who's going at what time. So it's an active live negotiation. It's a very sensual experience because you're looking at the person in the car. Are you going? Am I going? You're going. Hand gestures. Sometimes they knew each other. It's like, oh, hey, they're waving, right? And now most people are on scooters. So we were in a van, and on the scooters, you literally have whole families carrying the television and like it's just, total, from our definition in the West, chaos, right? It was pure chaos, but it was working chaos. You actually got places faster or at the same time as we would with our very controlled intersections with lights, cameras, everything, right? And so that was the dynamic I was living in for those few months. I came back to North America, and I found myself in my car. I'm in my own little bubble, sitting at a light, no traffic, just waiting for the machine to tell me when I could go. And I thought, holy crap, I feel so disconnected from people. I feel so disconnected from a life force energy that's just not here.
And trust too. It's like, I feel with our traffic system, I don't trust other drivers.
No, yeah.
Because they kind of follow the rules. They don't follow the rules. So it's like, even though there's these rules, there isn't, hey buddy, like, you want to go? You want to go? Like there's a, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
It's a red. I'm going to speed to the red light. Like there, it just creates bad humans.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, and what we're talking about here is the phenomenological, the sensory, the importance of sensory data that we get from our environment, which determines the nature of our relationships. So we're talking about intimate relationships, but we could also talk about just relationship to ourselves and to the wider community.
For sure.
In Bali, there's this relationship to each other. They need to be connected to each other to make sense out of the chaos for who's going when and how this whole thing's going to work. So we don't all crash and die.
Works. Like that's more how nature works. And our disconnect from, we both agree on this too, our disconnect from nature is part of this lack. And so that'll bring me to the open relationship thing. Yeah. All of those elements of boxed in rules, follow the rules, life still feels like shit. Why do I feel ungrateful? Lead to these reactive relationship decisions. That's right. Like maybe this shiny thing, that feeling of elation, those beautiful feelings, but then they'll fizzle out again because our lack of connection to nature, our lack of connection to trust and communication. I remember one time, speaking of traffic, was in Toronto. Toronto people drive nuts. I hate it. And I could feel their like feral energy. And it's like, it's okay, everyone. It's okay. But you can't do anything about it. Then I'm in Goderich, town of 8,000 by Lake Huron. And I'm still in Toronto driving mode.
Energy. Yeah.
And then I go to stop and then the person goes. And I was like, so just vibrating with anger and violent energy. And then I see into the car and it's my friend's mom, Susie.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, it's Susie. Like now it's fine.
Yeah.
But when it's me versus you in this car and you didn't follow the rules and it just feeds that ego grossness.
That's right.
Of separation.
Yeah.
And we're having a concept about a conversation about relationships. It's like needing to heal our first separation to ourselves in order to relate. Like we're always going to be talking about the same thing with this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you brought something up, and I want to clarify this for people too. And we say that we as humans are experiencing a disconnect from nature. It's not just the way we relate to nature as the third party nature, that thing out there. It's our nature because we are it. So it's like we're disconnected from our own nature. And part of what I think we started with today is an exploration of what is that nature that put the structure of, say, marriage, relationships, how society is constructed to the side for a moment and ask yourself, what is my nature?
Yeah.
Right. And if we could start to build what I call life regenerative systems and structures that mirror this nature, we would have coherence.
Yep.
We don't have coherence.
We got connected in the beginning. And then everyone, I just want to add this because this is non-judgy. Everyone's doing the best they can. Yeah. So the people in the marriage making the decision, everyone is doing the best they can within this broken system.
It's totally broken now.
So we're talking about our reactions to all the brokenness. And yes, it is symptomatic. Yeah. But the solutions can start with ourselves. So we can still, even though the system's blah, 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 you and I both live in a world where we can get to that connection. We can take responsibility for it. We can choose that. We can re-entrain we can connect to source because that's our nature. And the feeling of fulfillment that I think most people are seeking externally will be arrived at because it's never not here. Then we can connect and create and do the things, but we can't go get it from out there because it'll fizzle out again. It'll fizzle out again. And so the only solution is our reconnection to ourselves. And we can have the ability and free will to do that.
Yeah. This is the precise, what you just articulated is the precise context in which our program at TMIC Whole Life Architecture deals with our first methodology in the curriculum deals with, are you a creator or are you a consumer? Now it's rhetorical because I always argue that you are the creator of everything in your life. The question is just whether or not it was by design or by default. And when you're not self-aware and you're not doing that introspection, you're going to just consume life. And so what you were just saying about if you're going outside of yourself to fill that up, you're just operating from a consumer model, which by the way, we have been trained and taught to be that for our
Yes.
entire life. Because guess what? We have a consumer-based society, a consumer-based economy. And that even even leads to how we engage in our own relationships. We consume them. And so what you're talking about is a relationship non-structure, or a structure that's more fluid, where you just can't consume and expect it to always be the case. You've got to self-generate and bring your best self to it every single day.
Yeah. And what I do as we wrap up is when I feel myself get really attached to somebody, and I feel myself want to see them at a certain time and want this and want that, I stop. I don't communicate with them. I don't distance from them. I'm not ghosting them. I just mean I separate my energy from them and go, what do I need? What's going to bring me closer to me? Because as soon as I feel that something I need is out there, really in a desperate way that we all know what that's like. We can all learn to do. And what I've been doing is stop. Whether I'm attached to a singing job, whether I'm attached to how I want it to go with this one guy I'm seeing because I like him more than the other guys, then I go, okay, I need to reel my energy back in. I can feel it in the morning. I can feel like I might be thinking about somebody, and I'm like, no, I actually reel it back in, kind of like a fishing rod. Yeah. And so people haven't been taught how to manage their mind, their body, their heart, and their spirit, and how to be at choice. But you can. And then as you do, that is available for you to catch it before it becomes the reaction, before it becomes the affair or the whatever the thing is that could create more consequence. But the ability to come back into our own energy field and get back into creator mode is a really amazing tool.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fabulous session as usual. I'm so looking forward to the next one. We are really just getting started. There's endless topics around this. I mean, right? Yep. There's endless leaves on the tree.
Yeah.
And so, if you're listening and watching, we're going to cover all the leaves on the tree, all the topics over the course of this podcast that we're doing. Just consider, I just want to leave everyone with a thought, give yourself the opportunity to just get curious and inquire about who you actually are, so that you can start to live life from a place of choice versus being in reaction. And that might mean you need to become involuntary, or not that you become intentionally celibate. Whoops, almost slipped there. Or not. It might not mean that. It might mean you want to look at the structure of your relationships, the structure of your life. I think in the chaos and noisiness of the busyness of our life, it is good to extricate ourselves from time to time to recenter ourselves. And that could be a daily practice you develop, but oftentimes it might take something more dramatic at first just to kind of hit the pause button, recenter. But I think there's a lot for us to explore here, and for those listening and watching to explore in your own life about, are you in your relationship from a place of power or from a place of need? Are you just consuming this relationship? The structure of your relationship conforms to something more traditional or non-traditional is less the point. The most important point is whether you're deeply, profoundly connected to yourself so that you can be coming from a place of power. Any final words on your end?
Yeah. I just wanted to say to people listening, because I feel like people that are in reaction mode don't know themselves not in reaction mode, and that life will show you who you are. It's not cryptic. What you gravitate to, the happenings of your life, what doesn't work for you is all information to show you who you are. So don't get freaked out that you won't know. Once you start being open to seeing, you'll see. Yeah. Collect the data slowly over time, act on those. Oh, this is what feels right for me. Like to the point of I got into poly because I got an oracle card. So spirit speaks our language. Life speaks our language that had two lovers. I was conflicted between these two guys I was dating because I had all this other programming running the show. So life, I don't give oracle cards my power. It gave me hey, look at this.
It's a data point.
It's data point. So, don't give your power away to oracle cards. No, it's information to go.
Information.
So life will show you who you are. Yeah. You don't have to figure it all out. I just think
that's right.
Calm down. Just start with the intention of, what would it look like if I knew who I was?
Yeah. And I think we can talk about this next time, and it'll come up several times, but becoming curious about life versus prescriptive, being able to drop into a state of play. All of this will allow people to start seeing, feeling, hearing, sensing those data points that our perceptual filter is blocking out right now. Well, this has been great, Jenna. Let's pick this up next time. We'll continue to have the most important conversations about relationships. And so great seeing you and talking with you as always. And thank you everybody for tuning in and listening. We will see you again soon.
That concludes this episode of The Most Important Conversations. This in-depth conversation could set you on the path to self-improvement, which is essential if you want to be an effective leader and take meaningful action in your life. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of these stimulating discussions, you can find them at TMICglobal.com. Remember, the world is at a crossroads right now. You can't afford to waste this opportunity to take charge of your life, build meaningful relationships with others, and co-create a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.